Like, what is masking?
Disclosure. Masking, yeah, masking is like the, I guess to me, masking is covering up like identifiably autistic traits. And, a lot of the time, like, thinking about behavior and just actions that I've done that I've gotten negative feedback. And thinking like, oh, last time I did that, somebody reacted in this way, so I shouldn't do that. And so it's kind of like running, the things that I do and say through a filter of, will people accept this before I go ahead and do it? And I think that in talking to other people, that's like, and getting their experiences, that's kind of what they say as well.
And I wonder, like, I think people ask us a lot things like, um, how do I unmask is a big question that we hear.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's something that's, easier said than done for sure. And I do also like, whenever we have these conversations about masking, I always like to inject like the nuance of like, masking for autistic people is generally a survival mechanism. And, like sometimes like masking is just simply easier to do, at least in my experience. And I think in the experience of other people that I've talked to, masking is just simply easier to do because I can just go out to the store, or I can just go out and do my thing, and I don't have to explain myself to everyone. I can cover, I don't have to like, because that can be stressful and like bog me down when maybe I'm just trying to do a regular thing in society. And so like I don't want it to be like masking, masking bad, unmasking good. I want it to be that we can unmask around the people that we care about. I want it to be that, masking doesn't contribute excessively to our stress and our anxiety, because we do know that masking excessively can lead to burnout for a lot of people. I know that it has for myself. I think that's something that's also kind of interesting is like subconscious masking. And that's like a whole different thing that people end up doing, because it's like you've gotten so much feedback all the time over your life that you just learn to filter that behavior and rinse that behavior out to make sure it's like acceptable to the people that are around you. And so I think that like sometimes unmasking is a process of going against that filter that might automatically turn on in your head, which can sometimes have very scary results, right? Because sometimes the filter's reliable, sometimes the filter's not reliable. But what I find is that when I do the thing that I think I maybe shouldn't do sometimes, I find that people are actually pretty accepting, and they do, they accept me for who I am, and they accept the interest, or they accept the topic that I want to speak about. And I think that there's this fear that I've had in the past of, um, people not wanting to engage with that. And so I just think, well, nobody wants to hear about that. And then that's where masking can be really negative too, because, um, we learn not to share parts of ourselves with other people. And so I think that it's just like, I think the process of unmasking is thinking about like actively thinking about who am I, what do I want, how do I want to act in this moment, and like maybe going against that urge that some of us have to cover it up, and that can be very hard.
Right, because it's kind of about shifting your thought process from I have to hide this part of myself so that people will like me to I want people to like me for me and I'm going to show up as my whole self. And it's so hard to do that when society has told you from such a young age that like the onus is on you to be likable.
Right. And I think that, you don't have to be likable to everyone. I think that being likable to the people who actually like you for who you are is infinitely more valuable than trying to be likable to a lot of people. And some people actually, I think that's something that I've run into in the past as a result of masking, has been that I've tried to please other people so much that people say, well, you told this person one thing and then you told another person another thing. And it's like, well, I don't know. I was just trying to make everybody happy. And like that, sometimes people don't like that either. So I think that every time that I've made a decision where I wasn't being true to what I really wanted, I've either regretted it or I've gotten negative feedback for it. And I think that being yourself and being authentic and like, just like doing the things that you want to do is infinitely more valuable, even if it's harder. because I do want to underscore that it's difficult.
It's difficult to unmask, and just I think that we always, whenever we're talking about masking, we always like to note that there are communities where it's masking is even more of a survival skill than just making sure you're likable or making sure that you keep your job. Like there's layers and layers where folks in the Black and brown community may have to mask in order to stay alive in certain situations. And it's so important, like you were saying earlier in the conversation, just to have that nuance of like, how can I find my authentic self, but also keep myself safe?
Yeah, and I do think that, something that we talk about a lot internally and also in our training sessions is how masking affects, different marginalized communities and different intersectional profiles. And I do think it's important that the experience of masking is different across intersectional profile because of different variations in expectations and behavior. And so, we just want to be really conscious of that because like you mentioned, like in some marginalized communities, it can be the difference between life or death when interacting with authority figures or interacting with police officers or and things like that. And so we do want to be sensitive to that and be inclusive of that in this conversation because unfortunately, I think it's something that we just don't hear enough of when these conversations happen.
Now, if a person is looking for something at A&E where they could learn different like ways to support themselves so that they might be more able to unmask, is there a place at A&E where they could learn that?
Yeah, I think that, I think of two things right off the bat, which are presentations about our Autism 101 presentation, which we're now calling Autism Basics, and our hack strategies and supports presentation. And I think that the reason that those are going to be given by me and Maggie here, and I think that those are really important pieces because and they're really good introductory content, especially because what it will do is it'll talk about like it'll go more into this conversation and like delve more into like some more complex pieces about masking and social communication. And our hacks and strategies presentation is more about giving suggestions and guiding in the right direction and also giving I guess like direction around self-reflection and self-understanding so that way we can be better advocates for ourselves, and we can also build better support networks. And so I think that those are probably going to be two really valuable places to go. You can also go to A&E's website, ane.org. You can also check out our events page because we have tons of other people who are like talking about this stuff all the time, whether it be support groups or facilitators or LifeMap or LifeNet. And there's a lot of different ways to engage with this conversation via A&E.
This is such an interesting conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.